Grizzly attacks are not just encounters with wildlife, they're sudden primal clashes between human presence and raw wilderness. These incidents often unfold in moments of surprise, where instinct overrules reason for both bear and human. Grizzlies, guardians of vast, untamed landscapes, do not hunt people but may lash out when feeling threatened or protecting cubs. Each attack tells a deeper story of territory, survival, and misunderstanding. In truth, the danger lies not just in the bear, but in the fragile boundary where human curiosity meets nature's unspoken rules. In the remote village of Verkhnekhamsky in Russia's Amur Oblast, Elizaveta Sasha Yablonova grew up surrounded by wild animals. It was in 2011 when the incident occurred that would forever change her life. Her parents, Dmitry and Irina Yablonov, operated a small private wildlife sanctuary where they rehabilitated injured animals found in the surrounding wilderness. Among their long-term residents was Misha, a Russian brown bear they had raised since he was an abandoned cub found 7 years earlier. The Yablonovs established their sanctuary in 1998 after Dmitry, a former forestry worker, rescued several injured animals following a particularly devastating wildfire. What began as temporary care for these creatures evolved into a passion project that eventually included wolves, lynxes, and various birds of prey. Local authorities granted them special permits to operate, though some officials privately expressed reservations about their qualifications for handling such dangerous animals. Villagers often brought injured wildlife to the Yablonovs, and their reputation spread throughout the region. Occasionally, tourists ventured to their remote property to witness the unusual sight of seemingly tamed wild animals. The family subsisted on donations and Dmitry's pension, living modestly in their wooden cabin adjacent to the animal enclosures. Their lifestyle was challenging but fulfilling as they believed they were providing a valuable service to both the animals and the community. 10-year-old Sasha had developed a particular fondness for Misha. Against better judgment, but confident in the bear's docility, her parents allowed her to feed him and even play near his enclosure regularly since she was just 4 years old. Locals often expressed concern about the arrangement, but the Yablonovs dismissed these warnings, convinced that Misha's upbringing in captivity had subdued his wild instincts. Veterinarian Dr. Konstantin Petrov visited the sanctuary quarterly to check on the animal's health and repeatedly warned the family about Sasha's interactions with Misha. He cautioned during his visit just 2 weeks before the incident that bears were not dogs, and that no matter how domesticated they appeared, they retained their predatory instincts. His warnings, like those of others, went largely unheeded as the family pointed to years of peaceful coexistence with the bear. Prior to establishing their sanctuary, the Yablonovs underwent minimal formal training in wildlife management. Dmitry attended a 2-week course on basic animal care at a veterinary college in Khabarovsk, while Irina spent several months volunteering at a small zoo in Vladivostok. Wildlife experts would later point to this limited preparation as a critical factor in their misjudgment of the risks posed by keeping large predators. Despite their genuine passion for animal welfare, they lacked the comprehensive understanding of wild animal behavior that might have prevented the tragedy. The family's isolation contributed to their unconventional approach to animal handling. Without regular oversight from wildlife authorities and limited interaction with professional zoologists, they developed their own methods of animal care based largely on instinct and observation rather than established protocols. This isolation also fostered a sense of exceptionalism, a belief that their unique bond with these animals somehow transcended the natural order. Several visitors to the sanctuary remarked on Sasha's extraordinary comfort around dangerous predators, with one tourist describing it as unnervingly casual just months before the incident. The community had mixed feelings about the Yablonov sanctuary. While many appreciated their dedication to wildlife rehabilitation, others expressed concerns about safety standards. The Regional Wildlife Department conducted only 3 inspections in the 13 years of the sanctuary's operation, partly due to staffing limitations and the remote location. The most recent inspection, conducted 14 months before the incident, noted several areas of concern regarding enclosure security, but did not mandate immediate changes. This regulatory gap would later be identified as a contributing factor in the official investigation's findings. On the morning of June 17, 2011, Irina was preparing breakfast for the sanctuary's residents. Sasha, eager to start her day with Misha, ventured out early to the bear's enclosure while her mother gathered additional food from their storage shed. Irina had instructed her daughter to wait, but the girl's excitement got the better of her. When Irina returned just minutes later, she heard horrifying screams coming from Misha's enclosure. Dropping everything, she raced toward the sounds to discover that Sasha had somehow entered the pen. The bear, weighing over 350 kilograms, had Sasha pinned to the ground and was mauling her severely. With remarkable courage, Irina grabbed a nearby shovel and struck Misha repeatedly until the animal retreated enough for her to drag her daughter out of the enclosure. Sasha's clothing was torn to shreds, and she suffered grievous injuries to her arms, torso, and face. Dmitri, who had been repairing fences on the far side of the property, heard the commotion and rushed to help. He immediately called for emergency services while applying pressure to his daughter's most severe wounds. Given their remote location, it took the ambulance nearly an hour to arrive. Neighbor Mikhail Voronov, who stopped by to deliver fresh fish that morning, arrived during the chaos and helped stabilize Sasha while they waited for medical assistance. He later testified to authorities that it was the most terrifying scene he had ever witnessed, and that the girl was conscious but in shock, her body mangled in ways he could not describe without feeling ill. He assisted in keeping Sasha warm and alert until professional help arrived. The attack left Sasha with 4 fractured ribs, a punctured lung, a broken collarbone, and extensive lacerations requiring over 200 stitches. Doctors at Khabarovsk Regional Hospital, where she was airlifted, later reported that had her mother arrived even 2 minutes later, the girl would likely not have survived. Wildlife authorities investigated the incident and determined that despite his upbringing, Misha had retained his predatory instincts. They speculated that something as simple as a sudden movement or unfamiliar scent might have triggered the attack. The bear was subsequently relocated to a specialized facility in Primorsky Krai that was better equipped to handle potentially dangerous animals. Following the incident, regional officials implemented stricter regulations regarding private ownership of large predatory animals. The Yablonov family closed their sanctuary 6 months later, unable to continue after the traumatic event. 3 years after the attack, a recovered but heavily scarred Sasha appeared in public safety campaigns throughout the Russian Far East, warning about the dangers of treating wild animals as pets. Her parents became vocal advocates for wildlife safety education. Dmitry Yablonov later told a local newspaper in 2015 that they had foolishly believed they had tamed what cannot be tamed, and that their daughter had nearly paid the ultimate price for their overconfidence in their ability to predict animal behavior. The case became a sobering reminder throughout the region that even bears raised in captivity remain unpredictable and potentially lethal. Wildlife experts pointed to the incident as evidence that the natural instincts of predatory animals cannot be eliminated through human interaction, regardless of how docile they might appear. In the harsh wilderness of Afognak Island, Alaska, Thaddeus Wainwright experienced a near-fatal encounter with one of North America's most formidable predators. The year was 1998, and the island, known for its dense spruce forests and expansive grasslands, had long been home to the largest subspecies of brown bear, the Kodiak. These massive creatures could weigh up to 1,500 pounds and stand over 10 feet tall on their hind legs, making them formidable opponents even for the most experienced hunters. Afognak Island had been a popular destination for hunting enthusiasts since the early 1900s, with its abundant wildlife and challenging terrain attracting sportsmen from across the globe. The island's remoteness added to its appeal, as it was accessible only by boat or floatplane from nearby Kodiak Island. Its isolation meant that those who ventured there needed to be self-sufficient and prepared for emergencies. Wainwright, a 47-year-old former Marine from Montana, had been hunting big game for over 3 decades. He had tracked and hunted bears in several states, but had never encountered a Kodiak bear in the wild. His expedition to Afognak was meant to be the pinnacle of his hunting career, a challenge he had been meticulously preparing for over the past year. After securing the necessary permits and hiring local guide Josiah Tanner, Wainwright arrived on the island in late September, just as the leaves were beginning to turn and the bears were intensifying their feeding in preparation for winter hibernation. This timing, while optimal for spotting bears, also coincided with their most aggressive feeding period. For 3 days, Wainwright and Tanner tracked bear movements, studying their habits and identifying potential hunting spots. On the 4th morning, the pair split up temporarily, a decision that would prove nearly fatal. Tanner went to scout the eastern ridge while Wainwright remained at their camp to clean and prepare a Sitka black-tailed deer he had harvested the previous evening. The smell of fresh meat likely attracted the bear, wildlife officials would later conclude. At approximately 10:15 a.m., while Wainwright was field dressing the deer carcass near his tent, a massive male Kodiak emerged from the dense underbrush less than 30 yards away. Park Ranger Evelyn Callahan, who investigated the incident afterward, noted that the bear showed signs of food stress, appearing thinner than expected for that time of year. According to Wainwright's later account, he first heard the brush cracking, but initially dismissed it as his guide returning. When he finally spotted the bear, it was already charging. He reached for his rifle, but in his haste, the weapon slipped from his blood-slicked hands. The bear closed the distance in seconds, swiping the rifle away with one powerful blow. The initial impact knocked Wainwright to the ground, driving the air from his lungs. The bear clamped its massive jaws around his left arm, crushing bone and tissue. Using his hunting knife with his free hand, Wainwright managed to stab at the bear's face and neck, which momentarily disoriented the animal enough for him to crawl beneath a fallen log. Miraculously, the sound of an approaching bush plane caused the bear to retreat into the woods. The aircraft, piloted by supply runner Dexter Montgomery, had not been scheduled to check on the hunters until the following day, but had changed course due to incoming bad weather. Montgomery spotted Wainwright's emergency signals and managed a risky landing on a nearby beach. With Tanner's help, who had heard Wainwright's screams and rushed back to camp, they loaded the gravely injured hunter into the plane and flew him to Kodiak City Hospital. Wainwright suffered a shattered left humerus, multiple deep puncture wounds, 3 broken ribs, and significant tissue damage. Surgeons worked for over 8 hours to repair his arm, which ultimately required 3 metal plates and 16 screws to reconstruct. Despite their efforts, he permanently lost some mobility in his left hand. Alaska wildlife troopers investigated the scene and determined that the bear had likely been attracted by the scent of the deer carcass and perceived Wainwright as competition for food. They decided not to track and euthanize the bear, as its behavior was deemed a natural territorial response rather than predatory aggression toward humans. Following his recovery, Wainwright became an advocate for bear safety, conducting seminars for hunting groups across the country. He emphasized the importance of proper food storage and carcass management in bear country. His experience also prompted Alaskan wildlife officials to revise their guidelines for hunting guides, including stricter regulations about leaving clients alone in known bear habitats. The Afognak Island incident sparked heated debate within Alaska's hunting community. Some veteran outdoorsmen criticized Wainwright for field dressing game so close to his campsite, violating a cardinal rule of wilderness safety in bear country. Others defended him, pointing out that even experienced hunters sometimes grow complacent after days in the field without encountering predators. The controversy ultimately led to the Alaska Department of Fish and Game revising its hunter education materials to emphasize that bear encounters remain unpredictable regardless of a hunter's experience level. The updated guidelines included specific protocols for handling field dressing waste and reinforced the recommendation that hunters always work in pairs when processing game. Physiological analysis of the bear that attacked Wainwright revealed significant tooth decay and advanced age, estimated at over 18 years. These factors likely contributed to its aggressive behavior, as diminished hunting capability had made scavenging a necessary survival strategy. Wildlife veterinarian Dr. Marcus Paulson, who examined tissue samples, noted that the bear showed signs of chronic malnutrition, despite its impressive size, a paradox that underscored the challenges facing apex predators as their ecosystems underwent rapid change. This medical context added a layer of complexity to the narrative, suggesting that the attack stemmed not from simple aggression, but from the desperate calculations of a struggling creature facing its own mortality. The incident was subsequently included in Alaska's hunting safety curriculum, serving as a sobering reminder that even the most experienced outdoorsman must maintain constant vigilance in bear country. The isolated community of Ika-Ariak in northern Nunavut, Canada, experienced a tragedy that would haunt its residents for generations to come. In February 2005, the Nukariak family, Climate researchers temporarily stationed at this remote Arctic outpost encountered nature at its most ferocious when temperatures plummeted to -40 degrees Celsius. The settlement, established in the 1950s as a weather monitoring station, had expanded over the decades to include a small permanent population of primarily Inuit residents, though it remained one of the northernmost inhabited locations in the Western Hemisphere. Ikariak had historically maintained a respectful distance from the region's polar bear population. Local Inuit hunters understood the bear's behaviors and territories, generally avoiding conflict with these massive predators. However, climate change had begun disrupting traditional ice formation patterns, forcing hungry bears to venture closer to human settlements in search of food. Climate researchers had documented a troubling pattern in the region during the preceding 5 years. Sea ice formation, critical for polar bears' seal hunting activities, had been occurring nearly 3 weeks later than historical averages and breaking up almost a month earlier each spring. This dramatic shortening of the bear's primary feeding season had created a population of increasingly desperate predators willing to venture closer to human settlements. Dr. Amelia Chandler, who had conducted research in Ikariak 2 years prior to the Nukariak family's arrival, had warned local officials about the escalating risk, recommending enhanced deterrent systems and community-wide training on polar bear encounters. Her recommendations had been only partially implemented due to funding constraints and logistical challenges in the remote location. Dr. Malik Nukariak, a renowned climatologist of Inuit and Lebanese descent, had brought his family, wife Elisipi and their 3 children, twins Aputsiak and Nalak, 12 and 7-year-old Puja, to spend 6 months at the research station. The family had previously lived in Montreal, but had relocated temporarily to study firsthand the effects of warming temperatures on sea ice formation. The Nukariak children had been particularly excited about their Arctic adventure, documenting their experiences through an online blog that had gained modest popularity among science classrooms across Canada. Their posts, filled with wonder at the northern lights and detailed observations of ice formations, had never mentioned concerns about wildlife dangers. Instead, they had shared their growing appreciation for Inuit knowledge and culture, with Aputsiak expressing interest in traditional hunting techniques and Nalak developing a passion for indigenous art forms. Their final post, dated just 3 days before the attack, included a photo of all 3 children standing triumphantly atop a small ice ridge, their faces glowing with the peculiar joy of young explorers embracing a challenging environment. Their cabin, situated a kilometer from the main settlement, provided them with privacy but also isolated them from immediate help. The regional government had issued warnings about increased polar bear sightings that winter. 3 weeks before the incident, a bear had been spotted scavenging at the community's waste disposal site, prompting local officials to advise residents to take extra precautions, including proper food storage and carrying bear deterrents when traveling outside the settlement. On the evening of February 17th, as howling winds drove snow horizontally across the tundra, the Nukariak family had just finished dinner in their well-insulated cabin. According to Elisipi's subsequent account, they had been discussing the day's research findings when they heard what sounded like scratching at their storage shed outside. Malik initially dismissed it as wind-driven debris, but decided to investigate when the noise persisted. What he didn't realize was that a full-grown male polar bear, later estimated by wildlife officials to weigh approximately 1,100 pounds, had been drawn to their location by the smell of food. Undernourished and desperate, the bear had already broken into their exterior storage shed and consumed several pounds of supplies. When Malik opened the cabin door, the bear charged immediately, knocking him backward into the main living area. The force of the impact broke his right leg instantly. As the children screamed, Elisipi pushed them toward the bedroom at the rear of the cabin, but the bear, now fully inside the dwelling, lashed out with astonishing speed. Aputsiak, trying to help his father, was caught by the bear's massive paw, the claws tearing through his parka and into his chest. Malik, despite his injury, managed to retrieve a flare gun from a nearby drawer and fired it at the bear, momentarily disorienting the animal but also setting fire to a curtain in the process. In the chaos that followed, Elisipi grabbed Puja and locked them in the bathroom, the only room with a secure door. Nalak attempted to join them but was caught by the bear as he crossed the living area. His screams, described later by his mother, would haunt the settlement for years to come. Tikani Kalmagiak, a neighbor who had been checking his trap lines nearly a kilometer away, spotted the flare and smoke from the cabin. Realizing something was wrong, he rushed toward the Nukariak residence on his snowmobile. Upon arrival, he found the front door splintered and heard Elisipe's desperate calls for help from inside. Armed with only a hunting rifle, Komagiak entered the cabin to find the bear still inside. Startled by his entrance, the animal charged toward him. Komagiak fired 3 shots in rapid succession, killing the bear instantly. But the damage had already been done. Malik and Aputsiak had suffered catastrophic injuries and died before medical help could arrive from the main settlement. Nalak, though grievously wounded with deep lacerations across his torso and face, survived the initial attack, but would succumb to his injuries during the emergency medical evacuation to Iqaluit. Elisipe and Puja, physically unharmed but severely traumatized, were transported to a hospital in Yellowknife. The community held a traditional Inuit funeral ceremony for the deceased family members, with their bodies returned to the earth beneath cairns of stone assembled by village elders. Wildlife authorities conducted a thorough investigation and determined that the bear's unusual aggression likely stemmed from starvation due to diminishing hunting opportunities on the sea ice. Tissue samples revealed that the animal had not eaten substantially for possibly weeks before the attack. Following the tragedy, the Canadian government implemented stricter protocols for research stations in polar bear territory, including mandatory bear-proof fencing and the stationing of experienced wildlife monitors at all occupied outposts. The incident became a grim case study in how climate change was altering wildlife behavior patterns in ways that increased human-animal conflict. It was not just a tragedy for one family. It was nature sending a message about balance that they ignored at their peril. Nestled between the Caucasus Mountains and the Black Sea coast, the Sochi Zoo had been a popular attraction for both locals and tourists since its establishment in 1939. In the autumn of 2008, the zoo, known for its diverse collection of fauna from the surrounding regions, became the site of a harrowing incident that would prompt a comprehensive review of safety protocols in animal care facilities throughout Russia. The Sochi region had long been considered a unique ecological zone where subtropical climates met alpine environments, creating diverse habitats for numerous species. The zoo itself had been designed to showcase this biodiversity, with particular emphasis on native Caucasian wildlife, including several species of bears that roamed the nearby mountains. Konstantin Alexandrovich Sorokin, a 41-year-old senior zookeeper with 15 years of experience, specialized in caring for the zoo's collection of brown bears. His colleagues described him as methodical and cautious, known for his deep understanding of bear behavior and psychology. Sorokin had personally overseen the care of Kuzya, a 10-year-old male brown bear that had been rescued as a cub after poachers killed its mother in the Krasnodar region. On October 12th, Sorokin entered Kuzya's enclosure for routine cleaning and feeding, a task he had performed countless times before. According to established safety protocols, another keeper was supposed to be present during such activities, but staffing shortages that day had left Sorokin working alone. Zoo director Ekaterina Mikhailovna Petrova later acknowledged this deviation from standard procedure as a critical factor in the subsequent events. Junior zookeeper Anastasia Volkova, who was working in the adjacent wolf enclosure, was the first to hear Sorokin's shouts. She later testified to investigators that there was no gradual escalation. One moment there was silence, and the next, there were terrible sounds. Not exactly screams, but the kind of noise one never forgets. The Sochi Zoo had been undergoing significant transformations in the months preceding the incident, part of the city's broader modernization efforts following its selection as host for the 2014 Winter Olympics. Funding that had been scarce for decades suddenly flowed into infrastructure improvements, habitat renovations, and expanded visitor facilities. This rapid change, while beneficial for the zoo's long-term development, had created unforeseen stresses on both animal residents and staff. Several keepers had privately expressed concerns about the accelerated timeline for implementing these changes, noting that animals like Kuzya required gradual transitions to prevent behavioral disruptions. These concerns, documented in staff meeting minutes but not addressed by management, would later feature prominently in post-incident investigations. Surveillance footage from adjacent areas revealed a critical detail that might have contributed to the attack. Maintenance workers operating loud equipment near Kuzya's enclosure, approximately 30 minutes before Sorokin entered. The unusual noise had visibly agitated several animals throughout that section of the zoo, though no formal protocol existed for postponing keeper activities following such disruptions. Zoologists specializing in ursine behavior later suggested that this sensory stress, combined with Kuzya's dental pain and the disruption of his familiar environment, had created a perfect storm of factors predisposing him to reactive aggression. This multifactorial analysis shifted the narrative from one of unpredictable animal violence to a preventable systems failure involving habitat management, veterinary oversight, and operational coordination. Sorokin's medical recovery revealed the extraordinary resilience of the human body and spirit. Initially given only a 60% chance of regaining functional use of his right arm, he defied expectations through a combination of cutting-edge surgical techniques and dogged determination during rehabilitation. Dr. Mikhail Leonov, a specialist in traumatic nerve injuries who joined his treatment team 3 weeks after the attack, implemented an experimental protocol involving electrical stimulation and progressive resistance training that would later become standard practice for similar injuries throughout Russian medical facilities. Sorokin documented his recovery journey through video diaries that became valuable teaching tools for both medical students and zoo safety trainers, transforming his personal tragedy into an opportunity for systemic improvement across multiple disciplines. Volkova immediately activated the emergency protocol, alerting other staff members via radio. She then grabbed a fire extinguisher and rushed to the bear enclosure. Through the safety bars, she discharged the extinguisher toward Kuzya, creating a loud noise and a chemical cloud that momentarily distracted the bear. This brief intervention allowed Sorokin, already severely injured, to drag himself toward the enclosure gate. Senior keeper Viktor Fedorov arrived with tranquilizer equipment and managed to sedate Kuzya before entering the enclosure with emergency medical staff. Sorokin had suffered extensive injuries to his arms and back, with the bear's claws having penetrated deeply into his shoulder muscles and lower spine. First responders stabilized him at the scene before transporting him to Sochi City Hospital No. 4, where he underwent emergency surgery lasting over 6 hours. Dr. Natalia Kuznetsova, who led the surgical team, later reported that Sorokin had lost nearly 2 liters of blood and required multiple transfusions. The attack had caused severe damage to his right brachial plexus, resulting in permanent nerve damage and partial paralysis of his right arm. Additionally, deep lacerations to his back had narrowly missed his spinal cord, but significantly damaged the surrounding tissue. Following a thorough investigation, zoo officials determined that Kuzya's unexpected aggression likely stemmed from multiple factors: the recent habitat changes, a developing tooth abscess discovered during his subsequent veterinary examination, and possibly the unusual absence of other keepers during the cleaning routine. Rather than euthanizing the bear, zoo management decided to transfer Kuzya to a specialized wildlife sanctuary in the Altai region, where he could be monitored in a more spacious environment with minimal human contact. This decision was supported by Sorokin himself, who, during his recovery, insisted that the bear had not displayed predatory behavior, but rather defensive aggression. The incident prompted the Russian Association of Zoological Gardens and Aquariums to revise safety guidelines for keeper-animal interactions, mandating that no staff member should ever work alone with large predators, regardless of their experience level or the animal's history. After 8 months of intensive physical therapy, Sorokin returned to work at the Sochi Zoo, though in an administrative capacity overseeing keeper training rather than direct animal care. He became an outspoken advocate for improved safety procedures and proper recognition of wild animals' unpredictable nature, even in captive settings. Sorokin later concluded that no matter how well you think you know them, they remain wild creatures with instincts that can override any familiarity, and that was something he would never forget. The densely forested mountains of Gyeongsang Province in southeastern South Korea have long been regarded as some of the most pristine wilderness areas in the country. In the spring of 2016, these peaceful woodlands became the setting for a violent encounter between man and nature that would draw national attention to the increasing problem of human-wildlife conflict in the region. Gyeongsang Province, with its rugged terrain and lush deciduous forests, had historically been home to the Asiatic black bear, a species that had nearly disappeared from the Korean peninsula by the late 20th century due to hunting and habitat loss. Conservation efforts that began in 2001 had slowly helped the population recover, with approximately 50 bears living in the wild by 2016. Most resided within the protected boundaries of the local park, though some had begun to venture beyond its borders in search of new territory. Hyunjun Hwang, a 58-year-old retired postal worker and avid fisherman from Daegu, had been coming to the remote streams of northern Gyeongsang province for over 30 years. He knew the area intimately and had never encountered any dangerous wildlife during his previous expeditions. The region was known primarily for its excellent mountain stream fishing, particularly for native cherry salmon and lennox, species that required clean, fast-flowing water typically found in more remote areas. On the morning of April 8th, Hwang parked his vehicle at a Forest Service road terminus and hiked approximately 3 kilometers along a little-used trail to reach his favorite fishing spot along the Nakdong River's upper tributary. The location, while isolated, offered exceptional fishing conditions with deep pools beneath overhanging rock formations where larger fish typically sheltered. According to park records, rangers had posted warnings about bear sightings in the area just 2 weeks prior, but many of these notices had been damaged by recent storms. Whether Hwang saw these warnings remains uncertain, as he later stated he had not been aware of any increased bear activity in the region. Around midday, as Hwang cast his line along a particularly promising stretch of the stream, he inadvertently ventured close to an area where a female Asiatic black bear had established a temporary den with her 2 cubs. Wildlife biologist Dr. Min-Soo Park, who investigated the incident afterward, determined that the cubs were approximately 3 months old, placing the mother bear in a highly protective state. What happened next was reconstructed from Hwang's later testimony and physical evidence at the scene. As he moved along the riverbank, Hwang suddenly heard rustling in the underbrush approximately 20 meters away. Before he could identify the source, the female bear charged from the vegetation, covering the distance between them in seconds. The initial impact knocked Hwang into the shallow water at the stream's edge. The bear, standing approximately 150 centimeters tall and weighing an estimated 130 kilograms, immediately began mauling him, focusing primarily on his torso and abdomen. Hwang attempted to protect himself with his fishing rod, but the flimsy graphite shaft shattered instantly against the bear's massive form. His cries for help echoed through the valley and fortunately reached the ears of Jinwoo Park, a university student who had been hiking approximately 500 meters downstream. Park, a 23-year-old environmental science major from Seoul National University, had been collecting water samples for a research project on stream ecology. Hearing Hwang's desperate shouts, Park rushed toward the sounds and witnessed the bear attacking the prone fisherman. With remarkable presence of mind, he grabbed several large stones from the riverbed and began hurling them toward the bear while shouting loudly. This unexpected assault from a new direction momentarily confused the bear, causing it to back away from Hwang. Seizing this opportunity, Park helped the severely injured fisherman to his feet, and together they retreated downstream. The bear, perhaps concerned about leaving her cubs exposed to potential danger, did not pursue them, but remained in the vicinity of her den, watching warily as they escaped. Once they had put sufficient distance between themselves and the bear, Park used his satellite phone, standard equipment for research students working in remote areas, to contact emergency services. Given the location's inaccessibility, a mountain rescue helicopter was dispatched from Daegu Medical Center. Hwang had suffered extensive injuries, including deep lacerations to his chest, abdomen, and arms. Most serious was a penetrating wound to his lower abdomen that had caused internal bleeding. The medevac team stabilized him at the scene before airlifting him directly to Yeongnam University Medical Center, where he underwent emergency surgery. Surgeons repaired tears to his small intestine and treated multiple deep tissue wounds. Despite losing nearly 3 pints of blood, Hwang survived the ordeal, though his recovery would span many months and require several additional surgeries to address complications from infection. Following the attack, Korea Park Service officials increased patrols in the area and temporarily closed several hiking trails near the incident site. They also installed additional warning signs and educational materials about bear behavior at trailheads throughout the region. Rather than capturing or relocating the bear, authorities opted to monitor her movements remotely, recognizing that her aggressive behavior stemmed from natural maternal instincts rather than predatory intent toward humans. The incident sparked renewed debate about wildlife management policies in South Korea, particularly regarding the reintroduction of large predators to regions increasingly visited by outdoor enthusiasts. Conservation groups pointed out that such conflicts were inevitable consequences of successful species recovery, while safety advocates called for more stringent guidelines for activities in known bear habitats. Upon his recovery, Huang joined efforts to educate fishermen and hikers about wildlife safety. At a Park Service press conference, he reflected that he had spent 3 decades in those mountains believing he understood everything about them, but now realized there was much he needed to learn about sharing this space with its original inhabitants. The rugged wilderness of the Kootenay region in southeastern British Columbia has long been renowned for its breathtaking landscapes and abundant wildlife. In the autumn of 2019, the small community of Elkford, a former mining town nestled against the Canadian Rockies, experienced an extraordinary wildlife encounter that would captivate national attention and prompt a reassessment of safety protocols throughout the province's rural school districts. Elkford, established in 1971 as a company town for the nearby coal mines, had a population of just over 2,500 residents. Surrounded by pristine wilderness and situated at an elevation of nearly 1,300 meters, the community had always maintained a respectful coexistence with the region's wildlife, including black bears, wolves, and the occasional grizzly bear. Local schools routinely incorporated wilderness awareness and bear safety into their curriculum, reflecting the realities of life in this remote mountain setting. On October 23, 2019, 22 students from Elkford Elementary School were returning from a day-long educational excursion to nearby Fernie, where they had visited a historical museum as part of their social studies curriculum. The children, ranging from 8 to 10 years old, were accompanied by their teacher, Margot Whitaker, and a parent volunteer, Thomas Hawkins. The afternoon had brought unseasonably cold weather, with temperatures dropping below freezing and light snow beginning to fall, as the school bus, driven by 57-year-old Clarence Norwood, navigated the winding Highway 43 that connected the two communities. Norwood, a veteran driver with 23 years of experience, had made this journey countless times and was well versed in the potential hazards of mountain driving. At approximately 3:45 p.m., as the bus rounded a bend about 15 kilometers outside Elkford, Norwood spotted a large grizzly bear in the middle of the road. He immediately slowed the vehicle, assuming the animal would move away as vehicles approached, the typical behavior for wildlife in the area. This particular bear, however, exhibited unusual behavior. Later investigation by wildlife officials would reveal that this male grizzly, estimated to weigh over 600 pounds, had been struggling to put on sufficient fat reserves for hibernation. A poor berry harvest that year, combined with declining salmon runs in nearby streams, had left many bears in the region nutritionally stressed as winter approached. Rather than fleeing from the bus, the bear suddenly charged toward it. Norwood brought the vehicle to a complete stop, hoping the bear would lose interest, but instead, the animal circled the bus once before rearing up on its hind legs and slamming its full weight against the front bumper and grille. Norwood later told conservation officers that it was like nothing he had ever seen, and that in all his years driving these roads, he had never had a bear actually approach a vehicle, let alone attack it. The impact dented the front bumper and cracked the headlight assembly. Inside, the children began screaming as the bear moved to the side of the bus and began clawing at the windows, leaving deep scratches in the glass but failing to break through the reinforced material. Teacher Margot Whitaker, maintaining remarkable composure, instructed the children to move away from the windows and stay low in their seats. She used the bus radio to contact school authorities, who immediately alerted both local RCMP and British Columbia conservation officers. The bear continued its aggressive behavior, moving around the bus and occasionally standing to peer inside, apparently frustrated by its inability to access what it perhaps perceived as potential food. At one point, it climbed partially onto the hood, its weight causing the front suspension to compress visibly. Norwood, following emergency protocols, kept the engine running and the lights flashing while avoiding any sudden movements that might further agitate the animal. He strategically sounded the horn in short bursts whenever the bear seemed about to damage critical vehicle components. For nearly 20 minutes, the standoff continued as the children huddled in their seats, many recording the extraordinary encounter on their mobile phones. These videos would later circulate widely on social media and news outlets across Canada. Relief came in the form of RCMP Constable Veronica Martinez, who had been patrolling nearby and responded quickly to the distress call. Upon arriving at the scene, she positioned her patrol vehicle approximately 30 meters from the bus and activated both the siren and loudspeaker. The sudden noise and flashing lights disoriented the bear, causing it to retreat from the bus and move toward the forest edge. Conservation Officer Jason Weatherby arrived moments later equipped with bear deterrents, including rubber bullets and air horns. Using these non-lethal measures, the officers successfully encouraged the bear to return to the woods, maintaining visual contact until it disappeared into the dense undergrowth. They then escorted the school bus safely back to Elkford, where anxious parents had gathered at the school after being notified of the incident. Remarkably, no physical injuries occurred, though school psychologist Dr. Helena Morris was brought in the following day to help students process the frightening experience. She noted in her subsequent report that while physically unharmed, several children exhibited signs of acute stress response. However, most showed remarkable resilience, already framing the event as an exciting story rather than a trauma. Conservation officers tracked the bear for several days following the incident, ultimately making the difficult decision to relocate it to a more remote area with better food sources, rather than euthanizing it. GPS collar data confirmed that the animal successfully established a new territory approximately 80 kilometers north, where it hibernated normally that winter. The incident prompted the British Columbia Ministry of Education to review transportation protocols for rural school districts. Within 6 months, all school buses operating in known bear habitats were equipped with enhanced deterrent systems, including high-intensity strobe lights and specialized horn sequences proven to deter large predators. Elkford Elementary School incorporated the experience into its environmental education program, using it as a case study in wildlife behavior and human-animal coexistence. Principal Catherine Jennings explained that they had always taught their students about sharing their landscape with wild animals, and that this experience, though frightening, provided an authentic lesson that textbooks simply cannot replicate.